Welcome to the Anonymous Andrew podcast. Life and the choices we make. The choices other people make. Why we choose to ignore the red flags. Red flags like gaslighting, cheating, addiction, mental illness, and much more. What role do they play in relationships? Follow me each week as we discuss these topics with anonymous guests and experts to hopefully become better humans, resulting in better choices. Like I say, been there, still doing that. Now on to the show. Anonymous Andrew back with you once again. And today I have a very different type of guest. I really enjoyed speaking to this gentleman. Just finished recording with him, and I'm speechless. His name is Peace Buffalo, and everything from his appearance, which of course you're not going to be able to see unless you go to his website, to the way he speaks and the way he presents his comments and his approach to, he's a relationship coach, and we were able to chat a little bit before we started recording, and he knows my story, and I say this about every guest, but I really wish I had him around a year and a half ago. I could have really used some of the advice that he offered me, down to how to talk to somebody that's doing something that you're not comfortable with. If you're in a relationship and your partner is doing something that you're just not comfortable with, in my upbringing, there was a black and white way of handling it, and Peace just explained to me another whole different take on how to approach a subject matter that you're not comfortable with. And I often talk about when I did that with her, she broke right through the boundary. I would try to establish a boundary, and she broke right through it. And Peace told me how to handle that, and I did not know. I didn't even think of that. And I wish I had known that back then. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome of the relationship. I think it probably would have ended anyway because of what she was doing. But it maybe would have saved me a year of anxiety and grief and everything I went through. So anyway, I now present to you my interview with Peace Buffalo. Enjoy the episode, and I will talk to you on the other side. Hello, everybody. Anonymous Andrew back with you again today. And today, I have an interesting guest, and I am really excited to hear his story and introduce you to Peace Buffalo. Hello, Peace Buffalo.
Hi, Andrew. It's really great to be here. It's been nice chatting back and forth in email, getting to know you, and hearing your story, and frankly, just the personal growth that you've been going through, because I think we're in a time where we all have the opportunity to be digging into our own stuff, our own mistakes, our own addictions, our own inadequacies, and really come through it in a stronger way, in a way that doesn't kind of overpower us with fear. And so I admire the steps that you've been taking, and they parallel my own.
Yeah, well, well, first of all, let me tell the audience that you are an author. You have several books published, and you're working on a new book, and you're also a relationship coach. So I just wanted to get that out there so they know
Thanks.
Your credentials.
Yeah.
So Peace, tell me, I guess, about how you got to where you are today. And I know you have some stories that you could share, and tell us how you help people. Do you work primarily with men or couples, or?
I work with both men and women. I actually think of it as pansexual, right? Because it's not just men and women anymore. We now
Correct.
know that people identify in any
All across
place
the board.
on
Yeah.
the gender identity spectrum. And so I support, I welcome all races and creeds and gender preferences, gender identities. I was born in the Portland area. I've grown up, completely lower middle income, and I have taken a lot of, like, traditional education really wasn't for me. And so when I realized that not everybody follows the same path. There's an old quote by Scott Peck about, the road less traveled. And
Yes.
so I decided, like, I was going to make my life about learning the heart and really understanding how we humans tick, and um, what produced more joy and more pleasure and more satisfaction in life, as opposed to how many of us run on this rat race, the hamster wheel
The
of life.
hamster wheel.
And we never manage to keep up. We can't keep up with the expectations that
No.
society throwing at us. And it's one of those things that I when I hear stories like yours, I hear about things, and it ties into my practice about how do we make and set boundaries? How do we step in and communicate and say, hey, there's something that's not feeling good to me. Is there a time that would be comfortable for us to sit down and talk about things that are heavy? I don't want to sit and do it in, when we're driving to dinner. I want to have some dedicated time and talk about what my concerns are. And really, Andrew, this ties into the power of, you've probably heard Brene Brown talk about this, the power of vulnerability. Like,
Mm.
when I say, this is not, I am not comfortable with this. I'm afraid that, you're ready to leave me, or I'm afraid that I'm just not important in your life anymore. It takes a whole huge weight off, because no longer am I dancing around what it is that's really going on inside of me.
And
I
walking on eggshells. Yeah.
totally, I've just put
Yeah.
it out there because that's what's really going on. And I've learned time and time again, I would so much rather be authentic with somebody that I care about. Actually, frankly, I'd rather be authentic with everybody, not just those that are close to me. I feel like being vulnerable is a model for others to feel safe being vulnerable as well. And that
Pe-
makes
yeah. And peace. I 100% agree with everything you just said, and I do that. Not to be repetitive to you or the audience, but when I confronted my ex on numerous occasions, they weren't aggressively confrontational. They weren't. I sat her down and I said, I don't. I think what you're doing is inappropriate, or I tried to establish a boundary and put up what I thought were acceptable boundaries, and she didn't like them. And so how do you establish a boundary, or do like what you're talking about, when the other person will not, I recognize, will not, or break through those boundaries? And some might say, well, then that person's not for you, and you get up and you walk away, or you say, this isn't for me. In my case, I wasn't strong enough to do that. I felt that if I did leave this woman, I'd never find her, because she was very good at you talked about vortex before. She sucked me into her world of charm, and she was beautiful. And the first 6 to 8 months was that love bombing and trauma bonding, and I fell for it. And then came the reality of what she was doing, and or at least what I confronted her with. I couldn't walk away, I wasn't comfortable staying either.
yeah. Yeah. So, I feel like the way that we grew up, there was, like, the right way and the wrong way. It's a binary choice, right? It's either male or female, it's right or wrong, left or right. And yet I think the world is so such a spectrum of color. And I've been in the situation that you described. And so I know from firsthand experience that when I say, here's something that's not working for me, not like this is what you should have done, but just as an example of something that I've through painful experience realized is another option that we're never taught. And that is to say, like, I want to have, this is my vision of our relationship. If you're not willing to meet me with this boundary, then I'm willing to change it. I'm willing to do something different. Like, maybe we're not, we talked about exclusivity. Maybe we're no longer exclusive. You do your thing, I do my thing, and we still see each other once in a while, and we figure out, is it something that we each miss, right? So we kind of dial it down to figure out, is it, so it's not like a breaking cold turkey. It's a, let's take some time apart and have some kind of breathing room and reset the parameters of what our agreement is, right? If there's something about, maybe there's children involved, there's lots of other considerations. But I know that for myself, there have been times that I've walked away. I too was married and had somebody else walk away from me, and did my best to heal those complaints. It wasn't meant to be, and frankly, I'm a lot better off for it.
Oh,
So,
and I think I'm better off for it today too. But 7 months ago, I didn't feel that way. But of course, the time and the healing and this podcast and talking about it and being vulnerable about it and sharing my mistakes. I love the way you just expressed that. And we tried that, but here's the problem. If you confront somebody and say, okay, I think that you're not being monogamous, so if that's the way you want this relationship to go, and then yes, let's take a step back and you do your thing and I'll do my thing. There's I had my two thoughts that came to my mind was that I'm not like that. So unfortunately, or not, I'm traditional. If I'm in love with you, I'm monogamous. But take that aside for a second. She would have had to admit that she was doing that in order to say, oh, okay, then I'll continue to do that. And then you go do your thing. I might have been okay with that, but she didn't admit, she denied it. So how do you handle that? Because I might have been okay with that. If she said, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, which was escorting, and I'll go see other women in a different capacity, whatever that might look like.
mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, we about 18 months into the relationship, we did take a time. We took a month off. No contact for 1 month to see if we could if we were really codependent, and no contact. And at the end of that month, we got back together again, and nothing changed. Nothing had changed. She continued doing what she was doing, so that didn't even work. I mean, I like your approach. I think it's a very modern way, or not even modern, a realistic way of working out that problem. But it takes two people to do that.
Yeah. I don't by any means think that these are simple or, that they work for everybody. They're ideas to explore, because we don't have a lot of models of how to do kind of the gray, right? It's like we have the model of being together, like you said, codependent, like all in 110%, no separation, and then one party or the other tends to feel suffocated.
Yeah.
Versus the other, which is, okay, if we're not together, we're apart. And so that was the idea. The other thing that came to my mind, Andrew, is as you were talking, is just the value of having. In fact, I have a kind of an acronym that follows my name, Peace. So it's P for passion, E for envy. We'll talk about that. A for addiction, C for choice, and E for enthusiastic consent. And so the thing I was wanting to bring up was this idea of passion, that when I'm in a situation, and I think this is where you were as well, I might have been wrong, but it was sort of a clinginess, a neediness of being with this other person. And what happens is we get so so focused on that other person that we forget all the other things that bring us passion in life.
Yeah.
So, like, what I've found is the importance of men's groups, where I have brothers that I can drum with and cry with and laugh with, and not feel like everything is waiting for one particular person. You talked about 12-step groups. That's another great place to go and feel
Yeah.
connection. And I put it in the category of passion because I'm passionate about human connection.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think my mistake, one of many of my mistakes, was that I put her on a pedestal. She was, I have said this before. She was a Miss Universe runner-up in the country she was from. She just stunningly beautiful, and not to say that my previous wives or girlfriends weren't beautiful, but this one was, at my age, to find somebody as beautiful. I mean, I know it's vain and shallow to think that way, but I thought the whole package was beautiful, and I was afraid to lose that. But it comes down to, I think, self-respect and dignity and self-love, and I was afraid that if she decided that we shouldn't be together anymore, that my life would be meaningless after that. And that's how the victim mentality. And so how, let's say there's somebody listening that's in my shoes, that they're with somebody and they're idolizing them, but it's not being returned. They really need to walk away, because they're only going to get hurt. And in the end, I got hurt. And how do we find that strength at that time when we know that this person is not on the same page as you are?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to what you're saying. The thing that I wanted to go back to was something that you mentioned about how she was a a beauty pageant queen, right? And I think it felt to me like you had entangled her persona with the beauty, and then you like somehow realized, or not realized, you feared, I'm never going to get somebody as beautiful. And the
Correct.
thing, I think that is a kind of a little bit of a trance state, because I've had a lot of in the dating world, I've had a lot of people say to me, like, oh, you have a beautiful smile. I don't even really want to hear about a beautiful smile, because I know that beauty is skin deep.
Skin
Like,
deep.
they're going to get tired of me. And so what matters is what's inside. And so when I hear, if we kind of thread this apart and realize, wait a minute, there were things that she was doing and saying that weren't adding up. If you take away the beauty part of it, take away the, like, look at who I am because I'm with somebody so beautiful, and then you're left with, actually she's manipulating me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the place where I think we can get to, kind of a calm, hey, I'm going to go away for the weekend and think about this, and come back and say, you know what? I had a little bit of room. I'm good just walking away. And maybe it's exactly what you mentioned you did, the 1 month break.
Separation, yeah.
But I don't know. it doesn't sound like much changed in that. And I think that's where the active work really comes down to, whether it's working with a relationship coach, whether it's, you know, reading something that is, maybe it's something about Brene Brown and being vulnerable. Maybe there's something you talked about. Oh, there was an author that you mentioned. I can't remember, but the idea is like getting into study of our own heart, and then realizing, wait a minute, this is costing me just about as much as it's gaining me. That's not a win,
No.
right? I'm not suggesting that relationships are perfect. I'm saying that when we work through it, that we both need to feel better and more comfortable, more safe in the relationship. And if we don't, then we're not actually moving ahead, that we're not building those kind of relationship fibers that keep us moving in the same direction. They keep undermining where we're trying to go.
I think, and this is just either naivety on my part, um, while coaching has been around for, I guess now maybe a decade or two, it's starting to really become part of the mainstream today. In my world and growing up, and my father was a medical doctor, and I was living with bipolar disorder. I saw psychiatrists when I was young, and I was in therapy my whole life. So for me, when it was time that I felt that there was something out of alignment, I would go to a therapist. So I took her to my therapist, who happened to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner, but was trained in traditional Western philosophy. I think what I needed was a coach, a life coach with modern values like yourself, with I love the way you phrase that, to sit her down and say, what you're doing is I'm not comfortable with, and in other words, explain it. And if she said, whether she denied it or not, I could have, she was willing to go to my therapist. So I took her to my therapist, who said she's got a lot of trauma from her childhood. She needs to go to a trauma therapist. So she went to a trauma therapist for 3 months, ended up quitting the therapist because I think they were unpeeling the onion, and they got down to the childhood trauma, and she didn't want to deal with it. But I think maybe a life coach or a relationship coach would have been a better route. And unfortunately, this is going to sound very silly to a lot of people, but I didn't know about coaches like you, and I've had some coaches on the show until I had the podcast. So maybe if I use Google to type in relationship help, some coaches would have come up. But I just instinctively went to my therapist that I was seeing,
I
and
think
she,
that was a reasonable approach. I
yeah,
don't think there was anything wrong with that. I think it sounds like it just wasn't the right fit, and especially because she went off on her own to do therapy and then really didn't want to dig into
she
the deep
didn't. No,
issues, right?
no,
And that,
no.
I think that's the part, Andrew, where like when you said you like the idea of sitting down with the other. In my experience, in like the many modalities of relationship work that I've done, I can't control the other person. I cannot say you need to do something different. I can say this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not comfortable with. This is where I feel good about our relationship. This is what I'm afraid of, right? And when you do XYZ, or you say ABC, this is what I'm left with. This is what I start to imagine. I'm hallucinating, I'm fantasizing that like you're getting ready to leave me, or you don't really value me. And then the other person, I can say, what would help me in that situation is to hear that you value me, for you to tell me three things that I've done that have impacted your life, so that I'm not left with a vacuum of you're getting ready to leave me, but rather, oh, you know, there's a time, kind of a tipping point when it could go either way. And if you care about the relationship, you can
Yeah.
lean in. Yeah.
Okay. I've said this a dozen times on the podcast. Where were you 2.5 years ago when I needed you? So, yeah.
Well,
Unfortunately, I'm meeting all these great coaches now, and I could have used this kind of advice. But this is why I started the podcast, is to I I went through this. I'm on the other end of it. I survived it, and I'm actually thriving. I'm doing much better. But there are people out there that are not, and
yeah,
and hopefully I'm getting the message out there. Do you want to
yeah.
tell us about the book that you're currently working on?
Well, I've got two that I'm working on. One is a co-authoring a book on pleasure, sex and pleasure, and then
Okay.
I'm writing my own book on um, really telling a story from a previous partner's perspective on how much it changed her life, the safety that she felt in our relationship, what I did to bring about her kind of trusting men again. It had to do it, and so this book, tentatively called 3.3 percenter. It speaks to the notion that 1 in 30 men are decent lovers, and I feel like a rallying call to help men get a clue, not to uh, really to question everything they were taught about how to have sex, like in a manipulative, selfish, um, uh, you know, strictly PIV way, but really to look at it as mutual nurturing and caretaking. And so, you talk about uh, a monogamous relationship, whether it's monogamous or whether it's polyamorous. The whole idea is if two people are in intimate relationship, then to come to an agreement about what does that mean. And there's a huge power in agreements, right? Unless we get married and have kind of the standard rules about, you know, all of our finances are together. We do everything together. Once we get into the realm of we're just two people, what kind of agreements do we want to have with one another? Then we build trust around those agreements, and that's where boundaries come in as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love your concept of the book. You have a lot of competition out there though, because in today's culture, and I'm not familiar with this at all, but I've been hearing it over and over and over again, is the red pill movement. You probably have heard about it. Um, I believe it's coming to an end. That's what I'm hearing. But that right there it hurts young men today because it's teaching young men that I'm not even sure the 100% about what the red pill movement is about, but I know it's about taking revenge on women or being anti-woman, and that's just horrible. And then of course you have Instagram and Facebook and TikTok with all these influencers and telling young people how they should treat. And then of course you have pornography, which is teaching men how to have sex, which is just wrong. um
Well, you're bringing up a whole spectrum. I mean,
yeah.
there's like we can kind of go backward from what you're just talking about. So, in the realm of pornography, it's easy to kind of bracket and say, porn is porn. But truthfully, porn has changed from the time that you and I were young.
Yeah.
Like it was easy to grow up and have like a Playboy magazine under the bed.
Right.
Well, fast forward into the internet age, and you can see anything online. Most of what older porn was very um oppressive
Mm.
toward women.
Yeah, it was.
They were not paid well. Guys with big dicks were like, celebrated, and you fast forward to now, there's a lot of porn that is user generated. Like, just two
Yeah.
people who say, "Hey, let's do something on
Yeah.
our own." There wasn't anybody paid. They just did it out of like wanting to show off or wanting to have fun, and then they post it to, one of these hub sites.
Right.
Um, and then there's, kind of going on the spectrum. Now there's actually really cool sites that are made by women.
Yeah, I've
And
been hearing about
they're
that.
very egalitarian, like everybody gets paid the same amount. It's not taking advantage of anybody, it's celebrating sexuality and pleasure. So I've started to realize that it's important to distinguish what kind of porn people are talking about. Then the other thing you were talking about is the red pill movement. And I personally feel like that sort of grew out of, there were like 10 or 20 years where the big thing was, um I'm blanking on the name, but it's like a seduction kind of, uh I'm blanking on the name. It had to do with um really figuring out using certain coded language and seducing women. It's not PMA, but there's another term for well, I'm sure I'll think of it after we're done, and I'll email it to you. But
There's a term I heard recently called ethical porn. Have you heard of that term?
ethical porn is in that category that I was mentioning, like made by women. There's
Okay.
porn made by guys as well. What I was getting at is really like this notion of um, using certain language to get women to feel badly about themselves and then to be more endearing. And that tied in with your red pill movement. And that's really not something that I'm into at all. I think I'm at the other end
Oh,
of the
yeah.
spectrum, and really, um, when I'm out dating, I say to women, I'm really only interested in sex if it's good for both of us. It's
Yeah.
not something like, I'm not racing to have sex with anybody. I want to have a quality relationship. I want to have intimacy, and then the sex is really amazing. So
Amazing.
that's kind of what I work on and teach. I'm appreciative your of your letting me kind of giving me a little peephole into your world, and I appreciate uh, me getting to share a little peephole into my world as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, just as a disclaimer, I'm not in. I used to be into porn, the porn you spoke about, but I've just completely gone away from that.
yeah,
And this whole red pill thing is just something I don't even understand. But I think it started many years ago, and I'm hearing through social media and other podcasts that it's coming to an end. That these influencers that started it are starting to get a lot of backlash. So they hopefully it'll be gone shortly. But um, okay, so you're this book that you're working on is on sexuality, and it what's your target audience? It says
yeah.
everybody.
So yeah, actually, my co-author partner is focused on a book on masturbation and how to use um, toys,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm writing the partner guide on how to pleasure a woman, how to pleasure a vulva owner, um, whether whether that's a male or a female, but how to bring pleasure about in another. And so it's called the Fairy Godmother's Guide,
Mm-hmm.
and it's it's the most playful, powerfully deep book that I've ever been involved in. And so I'm excited about it. People can find out about it at buffaloweisfeld.com, and you can put that in the show
Yeah.
notes.
I
There will
will.
also be a link from peacebuffalo.com. So um, people
When
will
do
have
you
opportunity to find
when
it.
is your
We're
release date you're looking for?
we're looking at third quarter, so it's coming up in the next few months.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Thanks for letting me mention
Yeah,
that.
I would love to read that.
Yeah,
You know what? Maybe I had this thought the other day. Maybe when you release
circle
it,
back around.
I'll have you come back, and maybe I'll do a giveaway. I'll buy the book, and we'll do a contest, and I'll give away to one of my listeners or something.
Great idea.
Um, yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great. So,
I
is
know
there
it's
any?
late there. I appreciate the time, and I think we went all the way around in a circle, and it's a good way to wrap
You
up.
you gave me a lot to think about. So
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm going to have to listen to this and absorb it. But you gave me some interesting insight that I have not heard of before about how to approach some of the issues that I was facing in the past 3 years. And I just wish I knew some of these tips, not tips and tricks, but approaches that I just, because I come from a completely traditional background, and unfortunately that's in my DNA. But I'm an open-minded person, and I wish I had the resources that people have today. So, I mean, they're there, but I just didn't reach out to them. So, Peace, thank you for joining me today. And
Really nice.
we'll stay in touch. And are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I can also send you my LinkedIn as well.
Yes, send me all of that, and I'll put all that in the show notes, and we'll stay in touch. And when the book comes out, I would love to have you back. We'll talk about it.
That's great.
All right, Peace. Thank you for joining me. As usual, wow. 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 I hope you enjoyed that and was able to take away from it. I definitely learned some things there that I just had no idea existed in terms of communication with your partner. Speaking of communication, I'd like to communicate a few things with you. Please take a few minutes and leave me a review. And I'm also going to ask you to do one more thing now, is if you're a podcast, and I think they all do this, you can subscribe to my podcast or follow it. I don't know which platform you have, but it'll either be a subscribe or follow. I need more followers and subscribers. And I'm thinking of doing down the road, I'll be doing a paid subscription. We're talking many months, if not a year down the road. But if you subscribe now and follow me now, you'll be grandfathered in. So you will not have to pay for the subscription down the road. So please, I think there's 3 little dots somewhere on your platform. Just click on that and hit subscribe or follow this podcast, and leave a review if you can. It would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for listening, everybody. And as always, if it feels good, do it. And if you have to make a choice, please choose wisely. Until next time, ciao.